So after I got the gate done and I got all the hardware on, I needed to put something in the ground for the drop rods to go into. You could just shove them into the ground, which I don't really think is all that great of a solution. And also the soil in this area is rock and clay, and then I had a gravel on the top there, so that's not really a good option. One thing that some people do is they'll put rods in the ground that the drop rods can go into, and I didn't really want to do that either because those could kind of move around and they can also get clogged with dirt and debris. So I wanted something that the drop rods could go into that wouldn't really fill up with dirt and debris, and if it does, would be easy to clean out. So I came up with a solution where I would put a concrete block in the ground where the drop rods go, and that block would have a slot that the rods go into, and then I put another slot that went into the gravel area. That way, if there was water that got in there, it would just drain right out. So that's what I decided to do. And the first thing I needed to do was to make a mold for this block. So once I got the mold made, I dug a hole in the ground where I wanted it to be, and I set the mold in place and made sure it was nice and level the way that I wanted. And I mixed some concrete up and started putting it in the mold. And this concrete that I mixed up was quickset concrete, so I didn't have to wait too long to start taking the mold apart. Now, after it set up, I started taking the mold apart, and the sides came off relatively easy. And then I needed to take out the center pieces where the slots were at, and that turned out to be quite a bit of a process and was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. The reasoning is that the concrete kind of shrank onto those pieces, and those pieces were stuck in there. So they were both held in by pressure from the concrete, and also those weren't laminated surfaces, so I think that the concrete also stuck to them a little bit. And I started to just chisel it out of there because they weren't coming out on their own. And I was making progress on it, getting out that wood, just chipping away at it. Although when I got close to getting done, or at least halfway done, taking out the middle piece, I ran into a problem. I put too much pressure on it and wound up splitting the block in half. And so that was kind of a bummer. But you know what they say, stuff happens, right? You just gotta make do and adjust and figure out how you're gonna move forward. So what I did was I took the block out and I got some Gorilla heavy duty construction adhesive, and I cleaned up all the debris off of the blocks to make a nice surface for them to bond to. And I applied the construction adhesive and then set the pieces that broke off in place and clamped it all together, let it set up and cure, and that held it together pretty good, made the block nice and whole again. Now, once I got that done, there were some cracks where it had split apart. So I mixed up some concrete patch material and I applied that to the cracks and blended it into the block. And once that cured, the block looked, you know, like it was pretty much just a straight up block made that way. So then I basically had a block that looked like it was pre-made for this. And I went over and I dug out the hole a little bit deeper and poured in some fresh concrete in the bottom, and then set the repaired block on top of that. And also I sunk that block in, and I filled up the concrete a couple of inches around the block to help hold it together and set it in place. And then once that cured up, I glued on some strips of metal to the sides of the block with some construction adhesive, and I figured that could help hold it together. And then I also glued on a strip of material to that front slot to help prevent rocks and debris from going into that slot in the block. And then that piece of material that I glued onto the front also had some holes in it, so those holes would let water drain out of there, which is what that slot's for. Once all that was done, I backfilled it with some rocks, my concrete block for the drop posts, and came out looking nice and working good, despite having a little bit of issues here and there with the original mold. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe this might give you an idea of something that you can do for your drop rods. I think it'll work out pretty good. Well, have a good one and take it easy.